Back on the field and back in the NFL draft. Welcome to Texas Live. This is Horns Huddle right here at the Voice of College Football, coming your way every Monday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, where it counts. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Simulcasting right now on the main channel. We're on the Texas channel. Would love for you to move on over to the Texas channel. You got content there from Matthew, Sonny Verma, myself, and again, Matthew and myself getting together Mondays to talk Texas. So, Texas fans, Texas haters, get into the chat. Tell us what you've got. We're going to run through the NFL draft, check out the latest possibly from the transfer portal if there's anything there, and look at Matthew's rankings of SEC coaches, and I've got something to say about that as well. Matthew, what's going on tonight?
Nothing much, Mark. Just excited that we actually get to talk players being drafted for Texas. 2 years ago, we didn't have anyone drafted, so it's quite a difference.
That is quite a difference because everybody cycles up and cycles down. Of course, I'm talking about, for example, Ohio State not having as many players selected because a ton of guys came back, but there's not an issue there. They will flood the draft the next year. So there are decisions to be made, but nobody in the draft at Texas. I know that you had a stat a few weeks ago concerning offensive linemen not being drafted forever. And so it appears as though those days are over. And maybe this is one of the major NFL factories going forward. They had the second most picks with 11. And talk about cycling. Of course, Michigan's going to be a factor in the draft, but there's no question that they cycled up with a veteran team in 2023, which led to their high numbers in the NFL draft. Texas was number 2 with 11. And again, this could just be the beginning of an era of Texas and the NFL draft.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those things, looking at stats too, a bunch of stats posted to Twitter. And I'm going to name this one first, give everyone in the audience and you, Mark, to guess on this. Texas is the first back-to-back school and actually second ever with the first running back taken off the board in back-to-back drafts. So I'll let you focus and see if you can get that one. But here's some stats. They were second in the draft, like Mark said, behind Michigan. It's the first time since 2007 with multiple first-round picks. Since 2007, only 5 players have been taken in the first round. That one killed me. 17 years, 5 guys. We had 2 this year. There's a chance you could have 2 or 3 next year. So you could have 4 or 5 guys in the past 2 years. And then another thing that gets you excited, we're second in the SEC in returning production, 25th in the country. So it might be a little bit back. Like we probably won't have 11 guys drafted next year, but there's a possibility we have 8 or 9, and that's 20 guys in 2 years. That's really, really good. And like I said, we're the second school. We'll come back to it with back-to-back running backs taken first overall. No one's done it 3 times, and there's a possibility we could do that with Jaden Blue. Mark, do you have a guess on this? I'm guessing you know the school, but do you know the years and the player?
I really don't know the school. I'm guessing, since you believe that I know it or would have a good shot at it, that it's fairly recent.
It is. It is 2012 and 2011.
Then it's Alabama.
That would be correct with
Trent Richardson and
Mark Ingram.
Oh, okay. Mark Ingram. Yeah. Heisman Trophy winner.
So
I thought that was a little bit late for him, but yeah, he played in 2010. Yeah.
So Texas has a chance to do something no one's ever done. If Jaden Blue can, put on the field what we expect him to, we could have 3 guys come off the board first with Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Brooks, and then Jaden Blue. So that's something very impressive. And it breaks the Texas modern day record with 11 players drafted in a 7-round era. And think about this. This is in Steve Sarkisian's 3rd year. Like during the height of Mac Brown, he was getting 7 guys was his max in the draft. So this is something to look forward to. I don't think we've hit the ceiling here. I really don't believe that. There's a possibility next year. I think you're going to have for sure 1 guy taken in the first round. Kelvin Banks, as long as he doesn't get hurt, will be a first-round pick. He's the type of guy, too, where if you look at next year's draft class, the quarterbacks aren't as good and the wide receivers aren't as good. We could be talking about a number 1 overall pick from Texas. That is a real possibility with Kelvin Banks. I think Quinn Ewers is in that mix as well if he has a Heisman-type campaign. So I think those are 2 guys you need to look forward to in next year's draft if you're a Texas fan. Ethan Burke is a name that people are really high on. He had 5.5 sacks last year. And if not for it, he was playing on a torn meniscus the last like 5 to 6 weeks of the season. He probably ends up with 8 or 9 sacks. He's a big, long, lengthy guy that can still put a lot of muscle on his frame. I've seen him in every future mock draft in the teens. So if he has a really good year, I could see him getting taken in the first round as well. So there's 3 or 4 guys to keep an eye out on for Texas. Isaiah Bond, I could see having a really good year in a down wide receiver class. And that's another thing too. People got to realize, like, this was a very good wide receiver class. Like, if AD Mitchell decided to come back to school, he's probably a first round pick in next year's draft because next year's wide receiver class isn't as good. So overall, an impressive showing. I think Tavondre Sweat also surprised people. He went in the second round with a DWI 2 weeks before the draft. Like, if he doesn't have that DWI, there's a real chance he goes in the back of the first round, maybe top of the second round. But overall, a really good showing. Everyone that got drafted, or I thought would get drafted, got drafted. I was kind of surprised with Keelan Robinson. I mean, he went in the 5th round. That was higher than I thought for him. I think he's got a real shot on that Jaguars roster because other than Travis Etienne back there, they don't really have a solidified running back. So if he can, his biggest thing is balance. Like, the guy's got insane speed, even for the NFL standards. So if he can just stay on his feet, that was always his issue. When he cut, he slipped. If he can get some better cleats or something, I think there's a real possibility he could have a good career in the NFL and more than just a special teams player like I thought. So really good showing in the NFL draft. It was also just exciting because when AD Mitchell started to fall, Mark, Texas Twitter was engaged. Texas Twitter was like, man, why is he falling? Why is he falling? And this is something we're not used to. Like, the last 2 to 3 years haven't been this way. It's been, last year was Bijan Robinson. Once he went off the board, we kind of lost interest. But we were interested all the way 1 through 6. Basically, once Jordan Whittington got picked, we didn't really care about round 7. But just a really cool couple days for the Texas program and Texas fans.
Get the man some cleats. You would think that they would take care of that at Texas. Maybe they will in the NFL. And the other oddity there, of course, as Matthew brings up the trivia concerning back-to-back first running back taken off the board, matching Alabama, and then possibly Jadon Blue being the next to make it 3 in a row. And then mentioning Keelan Robinson, because my little nugget there was going to be, can anybody in the chat name a running back who had 12 carries who got drafted?
Yeah.
He had 12 carries last year.
And I think he's had his career is under 400 snaps. So it's you're basically drafting him based off of which he is one of the best special teams players I've ever seen in college and his speed. That's what you're drafting. And I think a team looks at him and says, you know what? If we can teach him some concepts in the NFL and he's also a pretty good pass catcher, he'll be on a roster for a pretty long time because a 3-down back is hard to find. And he's not a bad blocker when he was in. He just honestly didn't get the chance because you're behind Bijan Robinson. You're behind Roschon Johnson. You're behind Jonathan Brooks. It's really hard to show out behind those guys.
So I'm going to go the tough question route because the obvious question route is when we talk to somebody like yourself that's all over the roster and the personnel. It's, okay, obviously the guys at the top of the board are expected to succeed. Who are the sleepers? Who are the guys that are going to break out? All that business. Is there anybody in here who could disappoint? Is there anybody that's overdrafted here?
Okay, let me think about this. So I don't think it would be very hard for me to see Xavier Worthy disappoint in Kansas City. I'd be shocked just because you have the scheme. They're just going to use him like Tyreek Hill, and he's just as fast. And I honestly think he's a little bit better of a route runner. So I don't see that. I think AD Mitchell was kind of pissed off and honestly went into another great situation with Indianapolis. You're playing in a dome with a decent quarterback, in my opinion, in Anthony Richardson. I thought he played well when he was healthy. And then you have Shane Steichen, who's also a good offensive coordinator with the Eagles, now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Byron Murphy, again, I think he's just the closest prospect I've seen in a long time to Aaron Donald. I know that's a lot of pressure. I think, honestly, Tavondre Sweat. I think there's a world in which Tavondre Sweat eats himself out of the league, or he honestly just doesn't fit in modern day football. He's not a great passer. He's okay. He's a really good run stuffer. So I think he's very scheme dependent. So if he's in one of those situations where if he doesn't buckle down and start to take football more seriously, I could see to where he gets very few chances and then he's out of the league. So that'd be the one guy. It's the guy that I know you didn't ask me sleeper, but I think Jordan Whittington in that Rams offense is going to be very good. I think he's going to be used very well. I think you're going to see him out of the backfield because people forget this guy was a running back out of high school and a very good running back. He broke the state record his senior year of high school with all-around purpose yards in a state championship game. He had 520-something yards. He broke Eric Dickerson's longtime record. So him and a Sean McVay offense, I think the Rams got a steal, and I think it was the late 6th, early 7th round. So that would be my sleeper. I know you didn't ask that, but I think Tavondre Sweat is the one guy that I could see have an issue in the NFL.
Matthew, it's your show. I don't have to ask anything. You just take off on whatever you want. So there you go, everyone. You're going to go from show to show to show to show about the NFL draft, and you're going to hear about who's going to break out, who are the sleepers, who's all that. But obviously, everybody's pro their team. Just want to get a thought on there are going to be disappointments. Not necessarily with Texas. It's only 11 guys. And obviously, the low-end guys aren't necessarily expected to be impact players, but Jordan Whittington as low as the 6th round with pick number 213. Matthew says in the Rams offense, Sean McVay, knowing what to do with his talents, will make him a player. All right, that's it for the NFL draft, folks. We'll take any comments and questions here at the Voice of College Football. Please join us on the Texas channel. So I'm going to drop that link. Don't know how many people are watching us on the Texas channel versus the main channel, but please join us on the Texas channel. We will have posts there on a regular basis as we go through the summer on into August camp. And of course, our Texas show there every Monday night. And Xavier Worthy, Dante Hall, I think Tyreek Hill. Yes, Dante Hall, who was Dexter McCluster. Now, Dante Hall was the most electric and not necessarily from point to point, but wiggle and juke and all of that in the open field. I thought he was the most entertaining kickoff returner, punt returner I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, not the best. He's the human joystick for a reason. So I think that's, by the way, one of the most underrated nicknames in professional sports. The human joystick's an awesome nickname. But Devin Hesterley is obviously the most acclaimed Hall of Famer. But yeah, Dante Hall was fun to watch.
I think either Brian Mitchell or Joshua Cribbs have the most yardage, but Hester is in the Hall of Fame and he's considered the best. He is the most impact. All right, Brian Mitchell just played forever. All right, appreciate everyone being here. Let's get to our next topic. And again, if you've got NFL draft insider questions or anything there, the super chat's available as well. All right, before we get to our coaches rankings, we want to make sure we don't miss anything in the transfer portal. Terrence Brooks, it was expected, and now he has gone through and he has entered the transfer portal. And you're a bit surprised. Pretty much everyone was surprised because he was a starter.
Yeah, it was surprising just because that's a position where I wouldn't say we're. Yeah, I'll say it. We definitely struggled there last year. That was the weak part of our defense, but it's not like I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was average, and I was hoping it was going to get better. Terrence Brooks is one of those guys. He comes in as honestly Steve Sarkisian's kind of first big time recruit because he was committed to Ohio State and then flips to Texas. He's only still 19 years old. He was 17 at the time he committed. His dad is a Chet Brooks NFL player. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. And I think it came down to a situation of, cornerback, if you're just an average cornerback, there's a certain NIL market you're going to command. And I don't think Texas was willing to command the market that Terrence Brooks thought he had. So he left. And there's reports, it's funny. Sonny's been on this channel. He's an Illinois fan. He sent us in the group chat, Mark, are my two worlds colliding because he could be going to Illinois. That's the scuttlebutt right now. I don't know if he ends up there. Obviously, he can't transfer to the SEC because of the rule. So that is kind of I think, honestly, if he could, he probably might go to A&M because A&M does need corners. His dad went there. I think that's an obvious fit, but luckily that rule does work. And I could see that happening, Mark. Just in my worst nightmares, Terrence Brooks, if he could have gone there, goes there, game-winning interception versus Texas or something of that sort. So I don't have to live in that reality, so that's nice. But I think someone's getting a good player. I'm not going to hate on Terrence Brooks. I think Terrence Brooks, like I said, a lot of untapped potential. Right now, I think he's like a C+B- version of himself. Texas, missing on Jabbar Muhammad, cousin of Malik Muhammad, our best cornerback, really hurts. Oregon honestly could have single-handedly changed the outcome of who wins the national championship this year, because you had Jamari Caldwell and Jabbar Muhammad, both, in my opinion, were probably going to go, or especially Jamari Caldwell was probably going to go to Texas. Bo Davis leaves. He goes to Oregon. Jabbar Muhammad, he wants to start right away, wants that promise, because this is a contract year for him, and he can make a lot of money to go in the NFL. And we said, no, you're going to split time. You got to win that job. And he said, okay, fine, I'm going to Oregon. So we lost two very good players to Oregon in this portal cycle, and that could have changed the whole outcome of this season. So it definitely stinks. There's a couple guys in the portal. If you guys don't know the Takario Davis situation, which is one of the cornerbacks I think Texas is very high on, very interesting situation. He's been in the portal for almost 4 months, basically, and he's still with Arizona. He was in the spring game this last weekend with Arizona suiting up, and he's still in the portal. But this is a guy that's super talented. He's 6'4", 195, the type of guy Texas would really want. But I don't know if he's going to come here. That's the upgrade. There is no upgrade right now in the portal. There's only 2 to 3 more days for someone to get in the portal for Texas to upgrade that position. That's the one guy that would, in my opinion, would upgrade over Terrence Brooks. I think Cormani McLean, honestly, is about on the same level right now as the Terrence Brooks, and anyone else is below that. So we'll see what happens, but we definitely need another cornerback.
Michigan Nick asks, Mark, can we get a Michigan-Texas breakdown? Absolutely, we will. We'll give you at least one. So I can think of probably 5 Michigan folks that we can bring on, and we'll bring them on sometime in the summer. So we'll do 2 things. So we will have at least one Michigan deep dive during the summer. And then, of course, game week, we will do another preview. But we'll tackle all the main opponents during the offseason. During the summer months, May, June are the best, July, before we get to media days, we'll bring on all the big opponents for Texas, and we will size up the matchups. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do now because we don't even know what the rosters are going to look like. We still have a couple more days, and anything could happen.
My number 1 non-conference game. There it is, Texas, Michigan. Okay. So that's the deal in the transfer portal, and Texas still looking to fortify its interior defensive line. All right, SEC coaches rankings. Love to see these, Matthew, and then I'll pull mine up here and we'll compare.
Okay, so I mean, number 1, if you don't have this guy number 1, you're sleeping under a rock. It's Kirby Smart, 2 national championships, 94-16, 9-2 in bowl games, 5-2 in the college football playoff. After this, I think there's a debate for number 2 with about 4 guys probably. I changed mine. I originally had Brian Kelly. I'm going with Kalen DeBoer. He's just won at every level. He's 104 in 12. That's an astounding record. 104 in 12. That can it consists of NAIA, Fresno, and Washington. It's going to be really hard for me to see that he fails at Alabama. I just don't see it happening. Does he live up to Nick Saban's expectations? Absolutely not. I don't think there's anyone on this list not named Kirby Smart that would live up to Nick Saban's expectations. I don't even know if he would live up to them. Number 3, and I'm going to get hate because I know you get hate for it, Mark, but Brian Kelly. I have him at number 3. He's 283, 103 overall, 8-5 in bowl games. This has been his issue. 0-2 in the college football playoff, and he honestly doesn't win the big games that you want him to win. Has he won big games? Of course he has, but has he won the games that take you into that upper echelon? No, not yet. I am at number 3, and this is where I have Texas coach. I have number 4, and I think you can debate this with the next 2 guys I do name on this list, but number 4, I do have Steve Sarkisian. 25-14 overall, 2-4 in bowls, 0-1 in the college football playoff. I just think with the trajectory this program is going, the road they're going down, the way Sark and his staff recruits, especially with the NIL era, I think this is honestly, there's not much lower you could put him. I think 6 is the lowest point. I think there's a possibility he could get all the way up to number 2. I think it's really hard for me to imagine he ever gets up to number 1, but that's where I have him right now. Number 5, I have Lane Kiffin, 94-49 overall, 3-4 in bowls. He kind of runs into the same situation. He just hasn't had as long as a track record as Brian Kelly to me. Not a lot of big wins there. There were opportunities this year, in my opinion. I think you had a struggling Alabama team, and they didn't even know who their quarterback was. You should have beaten them, in my opinion. You didn't. I have him at number 5, but he is going all in this year. This is a team through the transfer portal and recruiting to where it's probably – no, it's not probably. It is his best team that he's had at Ole Miss. You got to win the big games this year. Number 6, I have Eli Drinkowitz, 40-22 overall at App State and Mizzou, 1-2 in bowls. Missouri has started to spend pretty big money on football. You have Cook returning quarterback. You have Theo Weiss and Luther Burden, might be the best common 1-2 punch at wide receiver in the country. You do lose your running back in Schroeder, but I think their defense is going to be even better this year. I think this team has a possibility of making the SEC championship game, maybe sneaking into the SEC or in the 12-team playoff. Number 7, it kind of drops off to me after this, but it's really hard to debate. I have number 7 is Mike Elko, 16-9 overall, 1-2 in bowls with Duke. I just think Jimbo Fisher tried to buy a program and buy a team with Texas A&M. I think Mike Elko is going to build a foundation and do really well at Texas A&M. I know that hurts Texas fans and especially hurts me to say, but I do think that's the case. Number 8, I have Mark Stoops, 73-65, 4-4 in bowls. I think he's very underrated. He's basically winning 7 games a year at Kentucky, which if you look at the history of Kentucky, that's a damn good job. And I think at some point, I've been listening to the Cover 3 podcast with Bud Elliott and those guys. They do a really good job. And I kind of agree with what Bud Elliott says on Kentucky. They've kind of gotten to the point where they're tired of him winning 7 games and kind of forget the times of them not winning 7 games when they're going 3-4 wins. And he's going to get fired at some point just because of the stupid expectations Kentucky has. And he shouldn't. If you're winning 6 to 7 games at Kentucky, especially now what the SEC is becoming, you've done a good job. I have him at 8. Number 9 is a guy, he could go sky on this list. I could be completely wrong. I have Josh Heupel. This might be a little bit low on him, 55-20, 3-3 in bowls. That's at UCF and Tennessee. I think there could be a big jump this year with Nico coming in at quarterback. They did pretty well in the transfer portal. I think this is going to be a sneaky SEC team. That's another team I could see just because of the schedule sneak into that SEC championship game. This is another guy I'm high on, but I had a debate here. Number 10, Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze, number 10 for me. What he did at Ole Miss was amazing, but he was kind of doing the NIL thing before NIL was legal, so he kind of got a little bit of a bump there, in my opinion. We'll see what he does at Auburn. I do like the situation. I like Hugh Freeze. He could definitely jump up here. He's kind of in that, like I said, Josh Heupel category at 9 and 10 to where they could jump up a lot. And then I'm probably going to get hate, but they're always going to hate me because I'm a Texas fan. But number 11, I have Brett Venables, 16-10, 0-2 in bowls. I think he's just completely underachieved so far at Oklahoma. That was a soft 10-2 last year. They had a very weak Big 12 schedule. Their schedule this year is way harder than the SEC. I think they're only going to win 7 games. I have him at 11. Next up, we have Shane Beamer. I don't know what to think of Shane Beamer. If someone wanted to argue and put him up 1 or 2 spots higher, I could see that. If someone wanted to lower him 1 or 2 spots, I could see that. I honestly don't know what to think of him. He's kind of in that no man's land for me in the SEC coaches rankings. And then number 13, I don't think he's a bad coach. Has he underachieved? Absolutely has. Billy Napier, 51-26, 2-2 in bowls. He did very well at Louisiana, overachieved there. He's gone to Florida and underachieved. There's a possibility he does a great job coaching this year. They go 6-6 and he's fired, but I have him at 13 here. Number 14, I have Clark Lee, 9-27 overall. He's basically done what every coach has done at Vanderbilt, not named James Franklin. If you wanted to debate and make him lower, you could, I guess. Number 15 is another guy that's on the hot seat. At 13, obviously, Bill and Napier on the hot seat. 15, I have Sam Pittman, 23-25, 2-0 in bowls. He had one really – I'm not even going to say really good. He had one good season at Arkansas. Besides that, I think he's underachieved greatly. And then number 16, just because he's never coached before, is Jeff Lebby. If you wanted to throw him out just to make them as a 15-team list, I'm completely fine with that, or coaches list. But I'm going to have him at 16 for now. Definitely could move up from there. And that is my rankings, Mark.
Okay, so once again, there are Matthew's SEC coaches rankings, Kirby Smart, the obvious number one, and then there are probably about 4 coaches in play for number 2. Kalen DeBoer, the short-term success at Washington, did a great job at Fresno State in 2 seasons, and of course, in the FCS, just did not lose a game basically and just won championship after championship. Brian Kelly at LSU, and when you read off his record, Matthew, actually, you may want to double check because Brian Kelly gets ripped off in terms of the I'm not going to argue the NCAA violations and what happened, but he gets taken. I believe he's got 2 seasons of victories because Notre Dame does of wins gone. So
Okay.
that 12-1 season in 2012 when they went to the BCS championship game, those are wiped off of Notre Dame's resume. And then also the next season they went 9-4. Those games are wiped off of Notre Dame's resume. So I believe that they are wiped off of his resume. So he's like 21 games better than his official record. And again, you may have gone somewhere where they had all the wins there. I tend to, depending on the severity of the circumstances, make a judgment call on that. Sark at number 4. We'll see my rankings in just a second, but I consider just based on the one big season and because he's recruiting his rear end off, and of course the offensive prowess there. Lane Kiffin, a similar coach to Sark, and I don't know if he's at the place that he can win big. We'll see. But just to run down Matthews before we get to mine, because I'll comment when I go through mine. Eli Drinkwitz, Mike Elko, Mark Stoops at number 8. Not going to have the record that you would expect that high on the list. Josh Heupel getting to Tennessee, had nice back-to-back seasons here at 11-2 and 9-4. Hugh Freeze, we will see. Just his first season at Auburn, did a great job at Liberty, coming off the mess at Ole Miss. Of course, you can try to gauge what happened at Ole Miss versus was he that coach or did he cheat his way to victories? Brent Venables at Oklahoma, we shall see. It's coming into year number 3. Did go 10-3 last year, had an awful first season, but he's transforming the program. Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Napier, again, like you, it's going to be so interesting to see how he gets evaluated this year because there's no way he is going to. Florida football has probably a 9-3, 8-4 standard generally. If you're not going to go 8-4, 9-3 over a period of time, you're going to get fired there because Jim McElwain got fired. He was doing those. He was bringing home those records, and so did Will Muschamp, and he got fired. But that's going to be impossible for Billy Napier. So I don't know how they're going to judge him necessarily. Clark Lee, we'll talk about him as well as Sam Pittman and Jeff Levy. So if we go from there to my rankings, and I've got the national rankings here, so I'll just have to weave through the mess here. So ignore my notes, folks. That's just for me to talk. So Kirby's number 1 in all of college football. And then my number 2 coach in the SEC is Kalen DeBoer, number 3 nationally. Yeah, I just think what he did at Washington was remarkable, considering Chris Peterson's as good as Chris Peterson is, and Kalen DeBoer lifted them even beyond that. And it was almost like Jimmy Lake never happened, never existed. Like Kalen DeBoer just bridged it straight from Chris Peterson right over 4-8, right to bam, 11-2 top 10, and took off from there. He's won everywhere. And when you say, can he live up to Nick Saban's standards? Of course he can't. If Nick Saban was starting again, I don't know that Nick Saban could live up to what Nick Saban did over the last 15 years. I've got Brian Kelly at number 3 in the SEC. I think he's really good. I just, again, we shall see in a little bit longer term here with LSU. If he cannot get over the hump at LSU, he will take a huge hit in my rankings. But he has improved the situation wherever he's gone. He was at a MAC school, I believe Central Michigan. I get them all mixed up between Western, Central, and Eastern. But he was at one of them. And Central. Then, of course, at Cincinnati, Central Michigan, he took off there. Then he goes to Cincinnati. He takes off there, makes them a national power at their level, and then does the same thing in Notre Dame. Notre Dame, he made them the best version of Notre Dame since Lou Holtz, and it's not even close. So I got a lot of respect for Brian Kelly. Again, yeah, he's going to win big games. but you kind of have to win big games to get to big games. So everybody's definition of a big game kind of changes depending on your success level. So my next coach in the SEC is Steve Sarkisian at number 4. And look where I had him last year. So the parentheses is where that particular coach was last year. He jumped from 44 to 8 because I had to see him coach a good team to a great record one time, and he did it. And he's rolling now, and we know what an offensive mind he is. And so he definitely is in a great position right now with Texas football. Lane Kiffin, we know, just a very odd career. Obviously, he gets these coaching jobs younger than anybody in history, basically, in terms of multiple big jobs. Who in the world gets NFL jobs, head coaching jobs, and a job in the SEC at Tennessee before they're like 32 years old? And he kind of botched those, but I think he's learned. And then, of course, USC as well. But I think he's learned quite a bit. He's still going to be Lane Kiffin, which is fine. I don't know if they've got the resources and the capacity to win big at Ole Miss, but he's done about as well as he has won more at Ole Miss than any coach has there since the beginning of the 1960s. So he's had a great run at Ole Miss thus far, 2-10-2 seasons in the last 3 years. My next coach in the SEC is Josh Heupel, so I think we're at number 6. Look at what Tennessee's been since Phil Fulmer's last couple seasons. Butch Jones had a couple decent seasons. Other than that, Tennessee football has been a mess going back to 2006-07. And he takes over a mess from Jeremy Pruitt, cleans it up rather quickly. And Tennessee's a really good football program. And they had a top 25 defense last year after him inheriting a bad defense, winning with a bad defense the season before. So I'm giving Josh Heupel quite a bit of credit right there at number 6 in the SEC. I've got Mark Stoops at number 7, just one spot off of your ranking. Again, people go back to Joker Phillips and Rich Brooks and the likes of those coaches before Mark Stoops. Kentucky football was Vanderbilt football post Hal Mummy and Tim Couch. So for 20 years, it was awful. And even beyond 7 wins, when whoever you reference talks about 7 and 5, yeah, that's what he's been the last 3 years. But shoot, before that, he had 3 10-win seasons in the span of 4 years. So Mark Stoops has done an excellent job at Kentucky. Now, has he plateaued? Is he another version of Lane Kiffin? Can he possibly do anything more in the SEC besides 8-4 being the high water mark? In a tougher SEC going forward? Probably not. And will they be satisfied with that? Have they leveled off? Yeah, 14-12 the last 2 seasons at Kentucky. Next up, I like Mike Elko. I'm a huge Mike Elko fan. Mike Elko took over Duke when they were awful. They had won 1 game in the ACC in like 18 games. He took over the same roster as David Cutcliffe had before he could recruit anyone, and came within 1 penalty of going to the ACC championship game. Had a lead against Florida State late in the 3rd quarter in Tallahassee last year. He coached his rear end off, did a great job. I think he was the best possible hire for Texas A&M. He's already been there, obviously, as the DC, and he knows what is expected of him there. Next up in the SEC, let's see where we go. I've got my next SEC coach. There is Brent Venables at number 29 in the country, and I believe that's number 8 in the SEC. I'm going to wait and see on Brent Venables. I think that he is trying to form a roster and a culture more in his liking than speed and space and quarterback-centric Lincoln Riley. So I think he's trying to do something that's much different there, and he's focused on strength and conditioning. The schedule was light to kind of prop up 10-3 last year, but Brent Venables, of course, one of the best defensive minds in college football. Next up in the SEC, well, we've got Hugh Freeze. So let's see. I'm at I'm
I think
losing
it's either
track.
9 or 10.
9 or 10 with Hugh Freeze. Where did you have Freeze?
I had 10.
Okay. So
Really,
we're right there with Hugh Freeze.
the only big disparity so far is you have Heupel, I think 2 or 3 spots above, and then Venables 2 spots above. But everything else is basically in line.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
not even
we're
that
gonna be
much.
way off on Eli Drinkowitz though.
Yes, we are. I tend to not jump to conclusions after 1 year, unless you go to a college football playoff like Sark did, and you're throwing the ball in the end zone to go to the national championship game. Hugh Freeze, yeah, it's hard for me to judge the Ole Miss situation because they were really good for 2 or 3 years, but then we know how they got to be that good. Now, if they would have been clean, uh, I also think that I'm giving them a little bit more credit because now again, all of that stuff is generally legal. So without those constrictions, if we were still in the college football universe of 3 to 4 years ago, and he took the Auburn job after what happened at Ole Miss, then I may question his ability to win. He's an offensive guy that had an awful, atrocious passing attack last year. So I want to see how much better the pass offense is this year. He took over Liberty. They instantly got better. So Hugh Freeze is a good coach, and that's one of the reasons he got the Auburn job.
And I
Sam
mean,
Pitt,
look what he did with Alabama and Georgia, where he had both those down to one possession games, had the lead late in the game, should have won both games possibly. So I mean, he's a great mind, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he got hired right when NIL became legal. I definitely think that was let's wait for it to become legal and then someone will hire him. But
yeah, that's a great point about those two games. The Georgia game as well was super tight, fourth quarter game, tie score. So for him to coach that team right to the wire against two of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country, good point there. Then we've got Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman's an odd situation. Of course, he was only an offensive line coach, never a coordinator, never a head coach. He gets a SEC job uh, from his offensive line job at Georgia. Then he comes in, and Chad Morris was a disaster, unlike few coaches in recent memory, losing to every group of 5 team in sight. And Sam Pittman immediately made Arkansas respectable. Even at 3-7 in 2020, they were a vastly improved team. And then they take off, go 9-4, win a pretty decent bowl game. And then the defense falls apart the next season. They're going to have another bad defense this year. They were awful last year at 4-8. He doesn't have KJ Jefferson to lean on. The quarterback situation's fairly rough with Taylon Green. Yeah, he probably, I don't know what their expectation is of this season, but they are not a good football team at all. And so he may be headed out in a difficult place to win. Difficult place. The high school football in Arkansas is not exceptional.
and it's
So
only
then we go
gotten
to,
harder to win too.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It's only gotten harder to
Yeah.
win now too.
Then we go to Shane Beamer. And like you, I'm trying to get a read on Shane Beamer because he had one of these burst onto the scene. Of course, the end of the Will Muschamp era was awful. So he instantly improved South Carolina. I very much admired the first season. He had to play 4 different quarterbacks, 3 or 4 games each. Patchworked a team that wins a bowl game, goes 7-6. And then they have another outstanding year, play Notre Dame well in the Gator Bowl, finish 8-5. And then last year, in addition to the record, they just looked awful in most of their matchups. Right out of the gate, Rattler gets sacked 11 times against North Carolina. They lose that game and make North Carolina's defense look like the 2000 Ravens. I know he's well liked. He's like this hip coach that people like, but of course you've got to win. And he's kind of at the crossroads at this point after a good start there. And then next we've got Billy Napier. Again, how's he going to be judged? If he's got a great recruiting class and they're 5-7, I don't know what they're going to do with that because, the schedule's brutal. They're going to have to. I would very much focus on how competitive are they in these games, because if they're losing by 1 score and they go 5-7 versus they just aren't even close. I would take that into consideration quite a bit if I were them. And of course, he did a great job at Troy. Maybe this is too big for him. I just don't know about Billy Napier, but certainly I think he's appropriately ranked. Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State. So my thought about a new head coach is that I just don't order the new head coaches at the back of the line automatically. If I believe that they've shown outstanding qualities as a coordinator, number one, number two, if there are coaches in the league that I think have failed, well, I'm going to give, in this case, Jeff Lebby kind of a neutral grade. I'm going to rank failing coaches behind him. Sam Pittman, maybe only one season off of that. Consider that he did go 7-6 and win a bowl game the year before that. So I'm very much into trends, and not one season isn't typically going to just change my mind on a guy. So I'm holding out on Sam Pittman a bit. So Jeff Lebby, everybody says great things about him. He did a great job at both OU and Ole Miss, and we'll see what he can do at Mississippi State as they go back to offense after they tried Zach Arnett coming off of the death of Mike Leach. And then I believe, is this the end of the line with Clark Lee? There we go. Now it's easy to pile on Clark Lee and easy to rank him last. You don't. And I give you a lot of credit for that. And I typically look into it a little bit further. But Clark Lee, man, they're just not competitive. They're horrible.
Yeah.
And Derek Mason, I didn't think was a good head coach. And he had them more competitive than Clark Lee, who made this outlandish comment at SEC Media Days a couple of years ago that they were going to have the greatest program in the country. And I didn't even know what that meant. Like, is that 98% academics and 2% football, or what is that? But, they're just getting trounced at this point. And that's coming off a season where the year before they finally got some hope. They beat Florida and somebody in Kentucky. They beat Kentucky and Florida in November. And maybe it looked like they were going to do something, but that didn't happen. I skipped by Eli Drinkwitz somewhere in there.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see him on there.
Yeah, I missed him in there wherever I had him. I don't have him that high. He certainly jumped quite a bit after this last season, of course.
You were worrying me.
I've got him right in front of Hugh Freeze.
Okay.
That's where I've got him.
10 to 8 range type thing. Okay, that's not too. We're basically one or two off on a couple of them, but yeah, I'm just high on him just because I think I also look at future a lot, and I think Missouri's starting to spend money on their football team. I think they've proven that with the type of recruits they brought in over the past couple years. So I think they're going to have a good year, especially their schedule. If I remember right, I looked into it about a month or two ago. Isn't that difficult? So I think they're going to have a pretty good year.
So you kind of slightly rank guys differently than I do. I don't care what their schedule is. Like if he played Vanderbilt every week, I would rank him this. Like I'm not trying to project how good their records are going to look or anything like that. I do my best. It's impossible to do it, but I try to strip away all that. It's like if Patrick Mahomes went to the worst NFL team in the league and his stats plummeted, I would still try to rank him where I thought, not where his statistics and wins and losses placed him. And Drinkwitz, here's the deal with Drinkwitz. Before last season,
he could have got fired.
Barry Odom had a better record than he did.
Yeah.
And he got fired. He was under 500, 2 or 3 games under 500 at Missouri. Like, that's not that impressive. So I got to see it another year. But you're right. It is trending with Brady Cook coming back, with his playmaker, Luther Burden, coming back, and them recruiting really well and putting money into the program. Like you say, it's looking good for him. He's probably the guy that I would want to go out and have a drink with above anybody else, because the guy's funny. Seems like a guy that doesn't take himself too seriously, that's for sure. But
Lane Kiffin wouldn't be number one on that list.
What's that?
Lane Kiffin wouldn't be number one on that list.
Not if you want to have a good time. Like if you want to be baffled half the time, or maybe you'd probably be like, you don't know how the evening would go with Lane Kiffin. You could wind up laughing your ass off and having a great time, or you could end up being pissed off at him for some reason, or just being annoyed or thinking he's a pompous jackass. Drinkwitz just seems like a nice guy. Like he's just a fun guy.
Yeah.
So I'd put Drinkwitz. I would select him first and foremost, just because some people tend to annoy me, and then I would be like, I would end the evening early. I could only maybe be out with Lane Kiffin for 15 minutes, and maybe if I didn't like him, I'd say, yeah, we'll see you. I don't know.
I don't know, Mark. Have you ever seen The Office?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Robert California from The Office reminds me of Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I can see that. I've got that.
Yeah, quirky, weird. It could be the best night of your life or like the weirdest or worst night of your life type vibe.
That's the point I'm making. And in all seriousness, I wouldn't, regardless of what Lane Kiffin, if I was annoyed or thought he was an ass or pissed off or whatever the case might be, if it was my only time to sit there with Lane, I would just put up with it for one time. I wouldn't do it a second time. I would do it one time. And I'm not saying that he would have that impact on me, but it's a higher percentage chance than Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah. No, but I did want to hit on something when you were going through the Brian Kelly thing, and I think it is important. I don't know if he'll ever get higher on this list, but he can get a whole of a hell lot like lower because
yes.
Look at who has won national championships at LSU. You have Les Miles, who you showed what kind of coach he was once Nick Saban's players left and what he did at Kansas. I know it's Kansas, but Lance Leipold, I think, is a decent coach, and you see what he's done at Kansas. And then Ed Ogeron, the Muppet baby, man, that he won a national championship. He has to win a national championship. He has to. That's like one of the, I think, 5 or 6 places in the country where you can be a completely average coach, and I'm being nice about that, and win a national championship. Like, he has to. There's no excuse for you not to win a national championship when I've seen in the modern day like I said, at best, and I'm being kind, average coaches win a national championship.
Yeah, Les Miles, he certainly benefited from the Nick Saban move and inheriting that program. Now, he kept it going to a certain extent, didn't hold it up to Nick Saban standards, became like 9-3, 8-4 most of the time. But before he did all that, he won a national championship, got back to a national championship game. But yeah, just losing 21-0 in a national championship game, that was simply Nick Saban out coaching and out preparing Les Miles for a month, because he had a month, because there weren't 3 touchdown difference between those two teams.
No, we saw it earlier in the year. It was 9-6
when they won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was, I still remember, I was like, I don't even know, 9-10 in that game, but I forget who the quarterback was, but I know they had like a split quarterback system at the time. It was
Jordan Jefferson.
Was he the starter or the backup?
I thought he was the starter for the championship game.
Yeah, and whoever the backup was, I was like, he wasn't bad. And obviously Jordan Jefferson is more of a running threat. And I said, why don't you put in the backup and see what happens? Like, I didn't understand that. And he just wrote him out. And they lost 21-0. Like, if you're down at halftime, I think the score at halftime was like 14-0, maybe 7-0.
I think
throw in the back.
I think it was one of those funky games with safeties and field goals. I think it was like 9-0 at half.
Yeah, put in your backup and see what happens. But yeah, so and not to mention, my God, how many gaffes did the man have with the play clock and the game clock?
I hated to see him go, because I used to do a video on the guy like every 3 weeks, because he would blow a game or he would luck out. Somebody saved him, but he really technically blew the game, mismanaged the game, but somebody saved him. Yeah, he was awful.
Yeah.
Jarrett Lee, yes, was the other quarterback. He could throw the ball. Yeah, he went with Jordan Jefferson in the championship game, and Jarrett Lee was a much better passer.
Yeah. So, and that was me as a 10-year-old saying, why don't you run out your backup quarterback? Because this is not working.
Yes, and a running quarterback against an NFL defense isn't going to work.
Yeah.
You're not playing Tulane this week.
No. And it's just, yeah. So I'm being kind when I say average, and that's what I'm saying. Brian Kelly, you've done great everywhere you've been. You've yet to win, like, quote unquote, the big game. So got to win a national championship at LSU. And earlier in the comments, I was getting hate for DeBoer. I just don't see how you can't have DeBoer at worst. To me, is like third. People are saying above Sark, or like I should have Sark. I just can't put Sark higher. If Sark repeats what he did last year, and let's say DeBoer goes 9-3, 8-4 at Alabama, I'll put him above Kalen DeBoer. But as of this moment, I would take Kalen DeBoer to lead my program. It's not by a lot. It's 4-2. I have Sark at 4. I have Kalen DeBoer at 2.
Because Kalen DeBoer, he's in a difficult situation from an expectation standpoint for anybody who's not a serious college football fan that understands what's going on is going to be like, well, he sucks. He went 9-3. But he's also in a difficult situation in the fact that although he's got generally the same kind of talent that Alabama typically has, he's inheriting the roster and brings some really good pieces with him from Washington. It's a very nondescript team. There aren't a lot of big time playmakers on both sides of the ball that are like star players. They're stars in terms of recruiting rankings and talented, but they're, he doesn't have the Brian Branches and I think anyway, I'm not going to go through the litany of Dallas Turners and the Will Andersons and any of those guys coming back. He loses most of his secondary with Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid and so forth. So,
and he's working with a quarterback that obviously isn't Michael Penix. This guy likes to throw the ball and last time we saw Jalen Milroe, I think he's a slightly above average at throwing the ball. He got way better last year compared to the first game to last game, but he's nowhere near where Michael Penix was. On top of that, the wide receiver threats are nowhere near where he's used to. And he just lost his Ryan Grubb. He just lost his offensive coordinator, a guy that he's had since NAIA. He's had him for like a decade plus. So this is the first time he's really had to replace someone that's like in his inner circle. So that's going to be interesting too. So I think at Alabama, I think if they go 9-3, it's a successful year in my opinion, the first year without Nick Saban. That's just my opinion. Alabama fans may have a different one. Other people may have a different one, but I think 9-3 would be a good season for Alabama.
Trying to think what their big non-conference game is. Oh, they go to Wisconsin. They should be able to win that game. They should.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, they're much more talented. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We talk Texas every Monday on Horns Huddle right here with Matthew. It's at 7 Eastern and 6 Central, and we are on the Texas channel as well. So please check it out. Give it a look. See what we got available there. Give us a break. We just revamped. We just got going here in the last couple of weeks, so we're starting to crank out some content there. So please check out the Texas channel and tell people about it. All right. Is there anything else we wanted to hit on?
I think that's it. Hopefully, next week we'll have some transfer portal news. Dominic Williams, obviously, I'm hoping that he commits to Texas. Maybe we can get Takario Davis or another cornerback, or even another Michigan State defensive tackle transfer did enter the portal, so maybe we look into that as well. But hopefully we can get someone on this team, because I do think we're a piece or two away of winning a national championship. I don't think right now we're capable, but I do think we'll make the playoff. We'll obviously get into more depth than that as we go down the road.
All right, folks, coming up next, the Michigan show is live typically on Tuesday, but they moved to Monday, as I understand, this week. So head on over to the Michigan channel. John D'Adamo, TJ Konerski, Ferris Khan. There's the crew for the Michigan show, and it's Monday this week right now. And then I'll be on with Matt Zemek and Tim Prangley on the USC show. That's at 10 Eastern and 7 Pacific. So just a few hours from now over on the USC channel. Matthew, thank you so much for making this happen. And we will be back, everyone, next Monday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central.
Yep. See you guys. Thank you.